You're listening to Get to Know World of Warships, a podcast created by Boggzy and Synpax.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Get to Know World of Warships. My name is Boggzy. I'm here with my co-host, Borla.
Good afternoon, Boggzy. How are you?
Good afternoon, Borla. I'm very glad to hear that you are feeling well, because this podcast would not be the same without you.
I was waiting for you to say this was going to be a very special podcast, so because you did not say it, I guess that makes it a special podcast.
I mean, the very fact that we're doing a podcast makes it special. So anybody who doesn't think it's special or doesn't think that I'm special should have a talk with my mom, because she assures me that I'm very special. So let's get right to it. We do this probably once every CB season, and I'm really excited. This is officially the Season 13 Clan Battle CV Preseason Roundtable. I don't know what the acronym is for that, but I should have thought of it ahead of time. Improv is hard, folks. Take classes. So let's go ahead and introduce the fine gentleman that we've got here with us today. From Clan KSC, we have Cable Guy. Hello, Cable.
Hello.
From 07 Devastating Strike, we have Triarch. Hello. From the Ray Clan, we have ReimuBakarei.
Hello, hello.
Hello. And from Clan KSC as well, we have Ahskance. Hello, Ahskance.
What's up?
Congratulations on making Twitch partner.
Ba-da-da-da-da-da.
Right? Okay. So, what we've asked these fine gentlemen and Cable Guy to do is talk a little bit about the upcoming Clan Battle Season 13 meta. What we and you could possibly expect from what's going on. Borla and I are going to go ahead and trade off asking questions that we've sort of written down ahead. If we feel like something could go in an interesting direction, we'll deep dive into that a little bit. But since we have quite a few questions and lots of panelists here, we're going to try and go quick so that you guys can get as much out of their gray matter as possible. So, I think we're going to start, I'd like to start with Ray, if we may. We'll start with Reimu, about sort of what your opinions on CVs and randoms and in general are, specifically when it comes down to the, I guess, the overall interaction they have with DDs. What do you think?
Currently, interaction with DDs, I would say that it's a lot better than before, definitely, especially with the reticle switch, but there are times when it just feels like DDs are just oppressed many of the times, mainly due to spotting. Sometimes you land that lucky dive bomb with Midway or all the rockets end up hovering to the destroyer, but I would say other than that, it's definitely a lot better than just at the start of rework, that's for sure.
Okay, fair enough. Cable, what about you? What do you think? General state of CVs, and especially when it comes to DDs.
I mean, honestly, it's mostly fine. Like, nothing's ever going to be perfect. I think a lot of the issue is people want to play their game without any repercussions of how they choose to play. And I just think, once again, coming from a CV's player's perspective, who sometimes plays DDs, like, you have to change your gameplay. You can't keep your AA on. You can't dive into the cap with no cover. So I think it's definitely better than it was. You don't have Midway half-healthing things. And I think the rocket changes might help. Like, it's another CV nerf from what I've seen, but it's relatively okay.
You're talking about the proposed upcoming, like, here's where the rockets are going to land, dodge them. That?
Correct. And as all the DD has to do is turn, and then he doesn't hit, depending on the maneuverability and the radical shift change on aiming. But you're going to have to lead a lot more. So I think that once that hits, then it's only going to make the Immelman stronger, which I can get to later.
Sure.
And it's another nerf on something like the Audacious, who's just been beaten into submission and is only going to be that much more useless.
Copy that. Triarch, how about you? State of the CV meta right now, plus how you feel about DD-CV interaction.
To be honest, a lot of things that the issue that a lot of people have with CVs, of course, is the spotting, where it can spot like an entire flank when they're trying to make an ambush or so. But against DDs especially, some CV players, of course, will focus entirely after DDs to try to win, because like DDs do have a lot of influence, and it is really oppressive as a DD. It has been better with the reticle change and with the new rocket change, but I think a big issue that a lot of people have is the spotting issues.
Sure. That's arguably the most powerful thing that the CV can do is just provide information. As I feel like that's a historical thing as well. As it's not just the ability to strike anything, but it's, hey, we can find you wherever you are. Ahskance, last but not least, state of the CV game and interaction with DDs. Go for it.
Overall, probably in the best spot that it's been. As far as the DD interaction, Shikaku and Enterprise continue to be really nasty as far as like the ability for rockets to rip stuff apart. But the rocket nerfs are going to make that go away. So if there's anything that tells you the DDs are not as oppressed as they were, it's the fact that every single game in North America has 4. And when I played during my 8-hour stream today, 5 DDs in it, game after game after game. That's not an oppressed class.
Okay, so we have a heavy assertion already. I can confirm though that I have noticed a lot more DDs in ranked, a lot more DDs in randoms. That's of course changed from the immediately after the Commander rework when it was just wall to wall Thunderers. It's nice to see more DDs. Borla, why don't you go ahead and take us to our next question now that we've gotten that out of the way.
Yeah, so as everybody knows, we have our new clan battle season starting here just tomorrow. So I'll start with Ahskance. Based on what we saw in clan battle season 11, do you want to speak to what you saw there and how you think that compares to what we will see in clan battles 13? Because the rules and the setup are very similar to start out with.
Sure. So when we started Clan Battle Season 11, the Richthofen was new, and its rockets worked and its bombs worked. So it was a big, scary threat. And not too long after it started, the FDR showed up, and Gaishu ruled the sky, beating the crap out of people with it. So MVR, the FDR, both of those just kind of like made headlines, so to speak. And outside of Gaishu running a DD meta, where even though you'd think, but there's carriers, they'll kill the destroyers. Yeah, no, tier 10 carriers got nerfed. They don't interact with DDs like that anymore. Well, the Richthofen's been nerfed, and the FDR is still what it is, but now we've got the Immelman. So I think adding that 6th carrier in, having the Richthofen nerf be what it is, I think it's going to shake up a lot compared to what it used to be in Clan Battle 11 for the coming Clan Battle 13.
Yeah, and just as a reference, like what we saw in clan battles was a lot of Richthofen. By the end of the season, it was about 60% that and 30% FDR. So those were the two mainstays that we ran into. Cable Guy, kind of the same question. What do you remember seeing in clan battles season 11, and what do you predict we will see as clan battle season 13 kicks off?
I mean, we obviously saw a lot of Venezia. I think the biggest difference is the MVR isn't going to be as oppressive because it's garbage now. One of its 3 squadrons isn't consistent. Damage nerf would have been fine. If there was just a damage nerf but consistency was fine, I'd probably still be taking it. Adding the Immelman, like Ahskance said, is going to shake it up a little bit more. But I think the biggest factor, right, is the ship bans or the ship limiting, and we have to see how that's going to shake out. Otherwise, I think you'd be seeing a lot of Petros, but it's gonna force teams to shake it up. As far as the CV meta goes, I think it's gonna be a mix. I'm picking the Immelman, but I know the hack is gonna be very strong for a lot of teams as well. And of course, you have the FDR with the skill floor that is probably 10 feet underground.
So I'm going to steal a play out of Boggzy's book, and for our listeners who don't know what you meant about the Richthofen, can you quickly explain what the change was between season 11 and now?
Sure. So with the Richthofen, with the better CV players, I could reliably get 2 to 3 citadels on every single strike, and I had a heal, so I could blap cruisers, huge amount of damage. Very good at kill securing for medium to low health battleships and cruisers. What they did, as opposed to the hack nerf where they nerfed the damage hasn't changed unless I'm not aware of that, but they really spread out the dispersion reticle. Now you're lucky if you get 3 hits on a battleship, and not even talking about cruisers. And even if you get those 3 hits, you have to hit the battleship at very specific points to get a citadel. So now those triple sits, which were automatic for players like me, are few and far between, and so it's not nearly as consistent. And then just to kind of keep going with the MVR, now that the MVR has been a mainstay, people know about the rockets, know how to angle to the rockets, and so all of its tools have pretty much been taken away.
Great, thank you. So Triarch, what did you see in Clan Battle Season 11, and how do you think that compares to what we'll see to start Season 13?
I mean, Clan Battle Season 11, like the beginning of Season 13, you'll probably see a lot of the surface ships very similar to last season, as in a lot of Goliath, Petro, Venezia spam. And of course, ship bans will change that up. As for CVs, yes, the MVR nerfs basically make it kind of useless in comp, and you'll see a lot more variety in like comp CVs now, I guess, with it, especially with the introduction of the Immelman. So yeah, we'll have to see by the end of the season like how much the meta has changed, but
Yeah, and I do think those bans, we can talk about those later probably, but I do think those will have an impact. What we see the first week or two may be very different than later. So Reimu, the same thing to you. Kind of piggyback on what we've been talking about, Season 11 versus Season 13. What are the differences to you?
First off, sorry if you can hear that in the background. There's a really loud construction going on, but it's
They're
really
working on my hot tub.
We rented a studio for you so that you would have all noise cancellation, and you're not even you're standing outside the door.
We spared no
Jeez.
expense.
But yeah, comparing the last tier 10 season to now, season 11, season 13, definitely MVR kind of was one that I got affected the most out of all the carriers, just due to that reticle nerf on the dive bombers. And then on top of that, the skill changes made torpedoes hit a lot harder, so I can see a lot more Hakuryu being used, and also with another Asia CC's video that just released right before this season's competitive mode starting, I can see a lot of people starting to use Hakuryu. We do have Immelman now, so I know a lot of good Immelman players out there are going to be using that ship over the others, and I think that surface ships wise is going to be pretty much the same until the bans and restrictions start hitting, and then that's when the meta is going to start changing. I believe it might turn to a more smoke comp, which might limit the carriers' ability to effectively spot things. So I think carrier wise will probably be hovering between Immelman, FDR, Hakuryu for the most part. I don't see VR being played as effectively at all anymore.
So you brought up something interesting, which was you actually mentioned that the SEA server, the Asian server, has been sort of experimenting or predicting that there'll be a bit of a smoke comp, and I'm assuming that smoke comp is going to involve Yu Yangs due to the fact that Yu Yang can smoke frequently and have a decent length to the actual lifespan of the smoke puffs themselves. So I'm assuming it's going to be some combination of Yu Yang and then something maybe like Harugumo, something somewhat mobile with smoke as well, and then your take your pick for smoke cruisers like Nevsky or maybe Petro, who knows. So do you think that that's going to be a viable a comp this time? And I'm going to start with Triarch if that's okay this time. I know Ray, you brought it up, but we'll get back to you. Do you think that a smoke comp and sort of a crawling smoke comp would be viable with carriers going? I'm going to pull a Boggzy and mention for the listeners who maybe aren't familiar. In Season 11, we saw very little of it. There was a period where several of the top NA clans, Gaishu's clan, SCCC, a few others, they actually used a combination of FDR for spotting and then Yu Yangs with Smolensks to essentially crawl smoke forward. And it actually worked to a pretty good degree. So do you think that this season we might see that? And if so, what do you think it's going to look like? Triarch, please.
There's definitely potential for a smoke comp, but the main issue that I see with it is like the Petro spam and how hard it is to farm down Petros. Even if you have like something high DPM, so it'd probably be something with more pen like Goliath than a smoke. But yeah, the smoke does limit a lot of damage that they'll take from both CVs and surface ships. And yeah, so it could work. And if you look at the smoke comp, it's probably going to be Yu Yang, as you said. Probably either Smolensk, Nevsky, or Goliath as the ships in the smoke, because those are the ones with like most HEDPM that you'd probably see. And yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Ahskance, how about you? What do you think?
I mean, smoke comps are pretty kicking. The real question would be how much radar gets integrated into this game. When there are CVs, the first thought of any destroyer player is, "Oh my god, I'm gonna die." And it doesn't have to be that, depending on how you use the smoke. It really just comes down to how much radar actually sees the smoke. And with Petros, I know there will be a lot of Petros, sure, but its radar is terrible. So unless they start swapping out to Nevskys or swapping out to something that actually has threat, I don't know. You can play the destroyer really close to the smoke cloud and have the overlapping AA keep it safe. So if you're gonna run smoke, it comes down to how heavy does the radar show up, and I don't know. It could be viable. I mean, it worked with the tier 6 season. I think KSC did some smoky kind of stuff in season 11 for a bit, but I think it's awkward enough that I wouldn't bet on it.
Fair enough. Ray, what do you think? Is it do you think the SEA's prediction that smoke meta might be a thing on NA as well?
It did work effectively during season 11, that's for sure. And a lot of it, I think, was taken from the tier 6 season, how effective smoke comps were at that time. Main issue is it's probably going to be coordination, and then how strong radar is going to be, how many radar picks there's going to be to counter smoke. It definitely worked in the most recent cuts. As a lot of teams actually ran smoke comps, but this time it's with carriers. But even in that situation, I still believe that smoke comps might overtake the meta. Again, it just depends on what ship is banned, what ship is limited. Yu Yang Nevsky is pretty strong with that that synergy, but I believe if Petro does get banned potentially, or any other long range radar user, then definitely smoke might be more of the better compositions to run this season. It's all just it's gonna depend on what it's really banned.
Okay. And Cable, what do you think? You think smoke comp might be a valuable thing for NA?
I mean, I don't necessarily think it will be, is what a lot of people are predicting. I think a lot of that is kind of carryover from COTS and how strong smoke was. But now we have CVs in the picture, and what you have to realize with smoke comps is it's like a West Coast offense. You have to smoke at a certain place at a certain time. When you have CVs into the mix,
What?
yeah, you like that?
I loved that. Like, it literally, my
Yeah.
brain just turned off for a second. I was like, I think that was a joke.
So for the players who don't know about football, West Coast offense, like you're throwing, the quarterback throws the ball to a certain place at a certain time because the receiver is going to be there versus kind of checking to see who's open, right? So for smoke comp, you have to be very coordinated, smoking certain place, certain time to get a certain ship into position. A lot of times, depending on the comp, those ships tend to be a little bit squishier. The problem is when you have a CV, especially like an Immelman who's busting 250 knots, and you're immediately spotted, either at the beginning of the game or between smokes in the middle of the game, then you have a decision to make. Do I weather the fire, or do I blow smoke now? Now you can blow the smoke now to save damage, but then all of a sudden that's going to throw off your timing and your sequential smokes, and it's going to throw off the comp. So I definitely think CV adds a wrinkle to it, and I don't think it'll be as effective as people think. But once again, as the other players have said, it also depends on what ship bans there are and kind of what the meta turns out to be. Because if a lot of long-range radar gets banned, then it's a different situation.
Certainly, and we'll get to bans at some point here, just to see what you guys think are the most likely culprits. Before I throw it back to Borla, I just have to say that joke double worked, because I didn't realize it was a joke for a second. Then I got it, but what I thought the joke was different than what you actually said the joke was. You said it's a football thing. I'm thinking it's a West Coast thing, meaning you can only smoke in certain places at certain times, because that's a really West Coast thing.
I'm like an onion, bro. I'm layered.
Oh,
See, the problem with
And you make me
Boggzy
cry.
is like he went to Oregon. He was a Duck, but even though I live in the Midwest, I've probably spent more time in Autzen Stadium than he has. If he had actually watched the Ducks play football, he would have understood all that timing, fast tempo offense stuff that Cable Guy was talking about.
I'm amazed that you guys play video games this much and you still have time for football. Like, I barely have time to remember where I live when I'm on my way home from work, much less. What am I talking about? I haven't worked in a year and a half. Okay, let's move on.
So yeah, let me pick up on one of the things that we're going to have this season, the Cyclone. So the difference with Cyclones, or one of the features of Cyclones in clan battles, is it reduces the visibility of surface ships, and I believe this season it's going to be 14 kilometers for surface ships, but it reduces the plane visibility. I believe they've announced 8 kilometers. So maybe we'll start with Ray. Could you explain how that makes you operate differently in a CV, and if it impacts any of the CVs in particular in a different way, either positively or negatively, that you see being able to use or needing to stay away from?
Alrighty. Back in season 11, I believe that's when also the Cyclone effect was also in place. I was mainly using the MVR, and a lot of the ships being used, which is Petro and Goliath. I don't know the exact Cyclone range last time it happened, but I remember from experience that a lot of times the moment I spot the cruisers, that's when their AA starts going off. I remember that a lot of times I had to constantly relay information on what ship is doing what, even though my team can see it on the minimap. It's a lot more info being passed around back and forth, and I don't want to say it handicapped the carrier. It definitely put a lot more stress on the carrier player during that Cyclone. It did open up a lot more opportunities for the team to become more aggressive, though, for sure. But I don't know. I don't find that. Definitely, the Cyclone is a bit of a hindrance for the carrier.
Do you think there's one carrier in particular that's either more handicapped or more helped by the 8K spotting range?
8 kilometers, I don't think that they'll be affected as much, or not one more than the other. Maybe the Immelman. I believe Immelman requires, I don't know what the exact range, how it needs for the skip bombers to work effectively.
Find some
I
CV
think it's
players
like
and ask them.
6. Yeah,
Ah!
That'll work. Think for the most part, okay, if it's 8 kilometers, it's just gonna be a lot of quick processing with starting attack runs. Should I attack this? Should I attack that? Pretty much, but I think it'll be that bad.
Okay, very good. So we'll just move down the line to Ahskance. What effects do you think you'll feel from the Cyclone to start with?
I do think it will mess with the Immelman, because the Immelman needs 7.5 to 8 kilometer run up to find something. And while you can see it on the mini map because somebody else is spotting it, I mean, have a rough idea of the line you're coming in on, there's a really thin amount between seeing your target and when you have to commit to make it happen. So it might mess with that one. It also might mess with, to an extent, Hakuryu dive bombs. Because if you're making a run up onto a target and the mini map, it looks like, you're not going to be eating AA, and nope, turns out he had a shot to you. It depends on how you're going to be juking it. As far as carriers, other than that, I really don't see it's going to be that much of an effect, other than making you feel like you're just alone in most of the game. But the surface ships part, the biggest stuff that matters on that, in Clan Battle Season 9, we used Stalingrads to provide cross-map sniping because there weren't battleships. Well, now there are battleships. But if you're in a Cyclone and you can only see 14 kilometers away, you don't have cross-map threat, not in the same way as you would otherwise. So seeing a lot of Petros, seeing a lot of Goliaths, seeing a lot of closer in, brawlier kind of ships would be completely expected because you just don't have to worry about cross-map potential.
All right, very good. And you covered the second part of the question too in your answer. How about you, Cable Guy? What do you think? How will you be affected by the Cyclones, and you've already mentioned a few times that you're looking at the Immelman as a tool that you'll use, and we know, I think it was mentioned about 7.5K is the perfect drop distance. Well, what do you think you're going to
Yeah,
have
it
to do to overcome
depends.
that?
So, I'll to backtrack just to cover that quick. That also depends on whether the target's moving away from you, moving towards you. And so that's going to determine your drop distance, quote unquote. On top of, it's also determined by how fast or slow you're going. So you can actually go faster and fling them out more, slow down, bring it in a little bit. As far as what it affects, it'll definitely affect the Immelman the most, just because if I'm not able to spot until I hit 8K, then it's an issue. But that's only going to be an issue, at least for me, or the better Immelman players, if that ship is unspotted in the first place. If the ship is spotted by somebody else, I can use the mini map all day. But if it's one that's by itself and all of a sudden he's popping up at 8 and I don't have a good line on him, then it's going to make it tougher. But even then I'll be able to hit him, but I might have to use the second line and go further into his A envelope, and that's going to take away one of the really good strengths of the Immelman, is just never coming into that close in AA, because you just turn around and you fly away.
Right. Okay, so Triarch, how do you think you're going to be impacted by Cyclones, and you think it's going to have an advantage or disadvantage for any of the CVs you're considering on using?
Cyclone, it does limit some options, I guess, because as they said, for Immelman it does become harder for the Immelman player, but also it's somewhat harder for, I guess, spotting purposes, because you want to be like, you're gonna have your planes on top of them when you spot them, right? And you generally drop like fighters to permaspot players, and the AKM Cyclone limits that a lot, because you have to drop it just outside AA range, but just inside 8 kilometers. So there's like a 1 kilometer gap there, and it does affect like things with like longer lineups, like hack dive bombers and Immelman, both torp and dive bombers.
All you, Boggzy, what do you got?
Well, so I think the time has finally come to talk about the Immelman, because the Immelman is obviously the new carrier that we have that was not in Season 11. The Immelman is unique in the sense that it has skip bombers, it has no rockets, it has only 2 plane types, which means a couple of things. Number one, I can just throw this out there so you guys don't feel like you need to repeat it. It has... since it only has 2 strike types, 2 plane types, that means it only has 2 different groups that can drop fighters, which means instead of 3 able to drop spotting fighters, it has 2. But the Immelman is really unusual, and it's really unique, and I wanna see from you guys whether or not you think this is something that's viable. Let's see where we're at now. We're at just nearly 30 minutes. So one thing I do want to make sure we cover, and I'm saying this out loud now so that you guys don't let me forget, is I really think that the three boats that you guys have said are viable are the Immelman, the FDR, and the Hakuryu. So I'd like to have a quick rundown from each of you in a minute. Maybe we could do that next, about the strengths and weaknesses of each one. But specifically,
maybe one of us could take each ship.
That's fine with me too. Yeah. Does that sound good? Okay to you, Borla?
Yeah, I think that'll work.
Well, then why don't we do that? Why don't we have let's start with the Immelman. And Ray, I know that you released several videos on the Immelman, and that's what got you and I talking not too long ago about Immelman specifically. And we recently had Fuerja. Don't worry, Fuerja, we didn't forget about you. He came on to talk specifically about the Immelman, but if you missed that podcast, we're going to have Ray talk to you right now a little bit about what the Immelman can do, what it can do better than the other carriers, and what it does worse than the other carriers. So if you would, please, Ray.
All right, so the advantages of the Immelman definitely is going to be the, first of all, high speeds, mixed in with those, the improved bomber speed from the skill tree. Second thing is probably the most obvious, it's going to be able to launch skip bombers from right at the edge or even outside of some ships' anti-air. So that can actually prevent plane losses, and they have a lot of squadrons available for mid to late game, which is probably one of the more important times of the match. And also on top of that, the very fast regeneration speed. And so if you're mitigating the amount of planes that you're losing, then with the fast regeneration speeds, you can pretty much have a full squadron near late game. And those 4 bombs from skip bombers, they can definitely do a lot of damage to a target if it's full pins, on top of having pretty good fire chance as well. So all those things together it makes it a pretty strong carrier.
Now it specifically, like, I think what a lot of people are going to sort of be wondering about as we go into season 13 is how effective and how reliable are the skip bombers against DDs. I can state, like, I'm not the best CV player in general, but even I can state that, like, you can actually hit the DDs with skip bombs. It is hysterical when it happens. But could you give us just a minute or two on how viable it actually is to be smacking DDs with skip bombs?
So in terms of viability, it's definitely very strong, especially if you land even 1 bomb. I think 1 bomb is like 4.3k, 4.2k.
Yeah,
on a destroyer. Yeah, and so landing even 1 it hurts. The only issue is actually landing the bombs. Now, I would personally view it similar to how MVR treats its torpedo bombers trying to hunt destroyers. Best time is going after a destroyer is when it's at a crossfire. When it's stuck in the middle of a crossfire and it has to choose, which way to turn. If you get it at that full broadside, you can. I don't want to say easily, but you'll be landing more hits from that. Sure.
Okay.
Other than that, yeah, it is definitely more difficult.
Gotcha. Treyarch, why don't you pick either the FDR or the Hakuryu and give us a overview of what its strengths and weaknesses are going into season 13.
I think I'll do the Hakuryu. Hakuryu, like, historically, it's been like a very balanced carrier. Like, the rockets are quite good against destroyers and cruisers, even though it has been somewhat nerfed with the rocket change. The dive bombers are pretty consistent and do citadel damage, which is a big bonus, of course, because it's mostly unhealable. And then there's the torp bombers, which do insane damage, have like a big squad, and they drop 2 planes at once. And they're fast planes, of course, in general. Weaknesses with the Hakuryu, I guess the planes are somewhat weaker than the others, and if you're running the WEG mod, of course, you significantly lose amount of engine boost, and it can be harder for lesser skilled players to manage that.
Can you talk a little bit about what that means? Because I confess I don't have the leg mod for the Hakuryu, so I'm not even familiar with it.
The leg mod for Haku. So basically, it means when you're using your speed boost, you can go even faster than what you usually do. But on the other side, you lose speed boost time. Like, I think it's like 20% or something speed boost duration.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So you find yourself burning through the speed boost a lot more, and by the time you get to the target, you might find yourself without speed boost, which means spending more time in AA, losing more points, and such.
Okay, fair enough. Ahskance, let's have you, if you would please, tell us about the mighty FDR. What does it do? What is it great at? What does it suck at? And yeah, sorry to stick you with the FDR.
Well, for those that haven't heard, there's a ship called the FDR, also known as the Franklin Delano Roosevelt, that slaps around big ships in really unpleasant, untidy kind of ways. And since there's going to be a battleship in this clan battle season, that's probably going to be drawing some bombs and torps. She can also torp into static positions. So, for instance, you have a Petro that's hugging an island. She can do this cool little 190-degree turn while the Petro watches. No! And then the torps come in and he loses 20,000 health. That being said, as much as the FDR is obnoxious, it's really slow. And one of the biggest difference between Clan Battle Season 11 and Clan Battle 13 is that with the Commander rework, not only were fighter speeds buffed, but fighter talents were added. And you can absolutely gate and shut down an FDR. And a very experienced player, if they get trapped in the fighters, they can recall and then spend 40 seconds flying across the map to get trapped in the next set of fighters. and recall and spend the next 40 seconds running across the map to get trapped by the next set of fighters. So you're effectively removing the enemy CV from the match for the first 10 to 15 minutes because you only have as many as 12 fighters on a ship or on a CV. So once you start running out of fighters, the FDR starts to slip its leash a little bit. Or if the ground game is going very poorly for you, your CV might be called off to do something, and then the FDR is like an annoying little kid that's hyped up on an energy drink swinging a bat at stuff on the wall. So it's like you need to pay attention to the kid, but you've also got stuff to do. And if you don't pay attention to the kid, it's going to run around breaking stuff.
The kid's going to
very
kneecap
powerful.
the other kids.
It's very powerful. It's very strong, but it's very limited and able to be reined in. And it really comes down to when does it slip its leash? Because if it gets those massive salvos in the first 5 minutes of a game, wham, 100,000 damage done real quick, blows a bunch of its planes. Well, then your team is crippled for the next 15 minutes of the game. If it deals 100,000 with the last 5 minutes of the match, it just doesn't even matter. So very, very strong, but it can be controlled. It comes down to fighter placement.
Fair enough.
Boggzy, something being reined in and then just waiting for it to slip its leash. That's kind of how you described Late Light to me, I believe.
Oh, Late Light. If only he listened to the podcast, he'd know all the nice things we say about him all the time. Those of you who don't know, Late Light is one of my co-leaders of Clan TNG, and he is very proud of the fact that he's never listened to a podcast. We'll see if he listens to this one.
I'm determined to troll him a bit until he listens, but go ahead.
What if we find out he's actually listened to every single one of them? He falls asleep to them every night. That's what I want to find out. So, real quick, Os, before you move on, talk to me just slightly about the interaction between FDR and DDs now.
Well, it kind of doesn't. I've actually seen a lot of high-end FDR players spend time torping DDs, which is bizarre because DDs can just maneuver away from the torps. But it is a way to kind of sit on top of them and spot them. You can also spot them by having the bombs kind of hover overhead. So realistically, if you're against an FDR, I mean, your destroyer does have to play somewhat close to some other ship that's got flak. Otherwise, I mean, the FDR could literally just sit on top of them while the enemy clan just pummels you from range. However, the FDR has almost no, and I really do mean almost no ability to interact with a well-played destroyer. It has very telegraphed attacks. You get to see them coming from a mile away. The bombs are dropped 4 to 4.5 seconds ahead of where they actually land, so the DD can just move. And the rockets need external spotting. They cannot spot for themselves and strike a DD, not at their aerial detection range. So it just comes down to you're going to have to play around some friends or you're going to have to use a fighter. Otherwise, the FDR is just going to camp on top of your face.
Fair enough, man. We're going to go to Cable finally. Cable, do us a favor here. See if you can take all three of what these gentlemen, or all three of these gentlemen's takes on these and put them into context for us and anyone listening about anything we may have missed, and also how do you think the meta is going to sort of shape itself around these three carriers that we're likely to see?
Sure, I'll do my best. So just to cover the Immelman, or at least my opinion on it, Reimu mentioned the speed, but the important thing about this can be both proactive and reactive, in that oftentimes a target or a situation will prevent itself. And you're able to recall whatever squadron you have, switch to another one, and get there very quickly. It's also reactive if you take any sort of fighter points to where you can get ahead of something like an FDR and get in front of it. Additionally, it's very strong at CV sniping if the situation presents itself. You're probably landing 10 to 11 bombs depending on your hit and only losing 1 or 2 planes. Now I'm going to disagree a little bit with Reimu. I will confidently say the Immelman is by far and away the best DD hunter at tier 10. I get very reliable DD damages. It's spotting, and you can constantly just throw bombs at it and get good DD damage, and that's definitely what I'll be focusing on. A con that I don't think was mentioned is big islands, not small ones, but big islands. It prevents certain avenues of approach, and so the enemy team can use that to their advantage to either place fighters, put AA bubbles for targets that CV1s go after, or just have a very long strike time. As far as where it's going to fit into the meta, It's going to use its speed. It's going to put a lot of pressure on one side of the map, or teams are going to use it as kind of a catch-all that it goes where it needs to put pressure at any one time, just because it can be anywhere very quickly. Hack is just kind of it's the not the best CV in my opinion, but it's the best all-around CV in that it has tools for everything. With the strength really being its torps, because you can torp TDs, you can torp battleships, you can torp cruisers, and you have a lot of them. Cons, the rockets are anemic, and then also another con is resource management, especially with your torp plane, just because you have so many a squadron. And I think if you have a less experienced EV players who just has a squadron wiped now for the rest of the game, you're at a disadvantage. This is going to be a more traditional role that we've seen carriers in, just kind of damage assist, spotting, whatever you need. And I think it's going to fit into a lot of different comps. FDR, some of this already been said, but really big strength is the plane health. So it's great at perma spotting. Especially against DDs, as was said. We saw guys should do this with the last tier 10 season. Once again, it can't hit him very well. Personally, I could probably get a DD in the HE bomb reticle 90-95% of the time. Whether or not any of my bombs hit, that's a different story. So I think the FDR will be really good if teams kind of play it forward up on the contested cap and just use that to perma spot everything down there, bang it into submission in turn for plane loss. And Ahskance also mentioned that for a con, it's slow. But the important thing about this is it's very slow to react. So if there's a push on off flank, if somebody needs protection, that's going to be an issue. It has great staying time. Like once you're in a position, you can stay there for a long time and take a lot of AA fire. But once you're there, it's there, and so you're gonna have to. Teams are gonna have to use this in the meta to plan it out well in advance while the FDR is going. And I think it'll be much more scripted compared to the other two, where they're gonna be more versatile as far as where they are and when. So with the FDR, it's hard to react to changing conditions and take those targets of opportunity. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, I'd say so.
All right, very good. So, a question: there's been some videos going around of hack CV sniping. Boggzy and I talked a little bit about the damage an Immelman can do early on, combined with if it's spotted and before the cyclones hit, either long-range cruisers or battleships will be there to take pot shots. Maybe we'll start with Triarch. Do you think it will be viable with any of these ships to go after the enemy CV early?
For the enemy CV sniping, traditionally MVR, of course, last season was really good at CV sniping against Haku, Midway, FDR. This time, Immelman is very strong against CV sniping with its ability for the bombs to land on the target without losing many planes. And then for Haku CV sniping, you can do it. The plane losses with your torpedo bomber reserves is astronomical. You lose so many of them, and you just don't have them to deal with any other surface ships at the end. You might have 7-ish or 6-ish, but it's just not viable. And then the other ones, I guess FDR is decent at CV sniping, but you just lose so many planes with that as well.
So for a yes or no, do you think good CV players will be doing it this season?
Depends on the CV. Immelman, if you see an Immelman, chances are they'll try to snipe you. FDR probably won't. Haku probably won't. So
okay, yeah, very good. It'll depend on how the Immelman does on his first strikes, probably. Reimu, same question. With the things that we've seen, what's your feelings on going after the enemy CV early?
From that video that the SEACC posted about the Hakuryu sniping, it is, I want to say effective, but it works. The only issue is end up losing a lot more planes. You can get the initial strikes off, but when the enemy CV retaliates and starts putting down more and more fighters, you're gonna end up losing all of them, which is gonna hurt you for mid to late game. Now, my opinion for CV sniping in general, I feel like it's a waste of time. It doesn't matter if you kill it in the first 5 minutes, because when you're when you're striking the enemy carrier, which takes about a couple minutes, the enemy carrier can be impacting the game during that time as well, striking your team. But even after, let's say you do kill the carrier as Hakuryu, you're gonna end up with very low reserves of torpedo bombers, which are your main weapons on that ship. Then if you're thinking from like FDR just takes a little too long. I don't think it's gonna be doing CV sniping. Immelman most likely, because it's just how fast the planes are, how effective it is. You can save a lot of planes like that as well. In terms of packing the game, I don't think that it's gonna really do much for everyone to focus the carrier or even you as the CV player.
All right, appreciate that. Ahskance, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have to mirror a lot of what he said. If you actually watch that video, the Sarazar's thing, he comes out with some torps, uses the torps, and it's not the AA of the carrier that saves it, it's the defensive fighters. So using the consumable build, which is perfectly fine and ranked and competitive and whatever, he's able to out-heal the fighter damage, and then it's just use 2, lose 2. That means lose 2 planes when you use 2 planes to drop 2 torps. So it's like an even plane usage to loss ratio. It's just pretty much what you want. But if you watch the video, it still takes 4.5 to 5.5, maybe 6 minutes. CV sniping was already a thing. It just took 6 to 8. So you shaved off 2 minutes. But if you spend 5 minutes with your carrier effectively DC'd, not doing anything, how much of your team and how much of your positions have been threatened or screwed with? Like it's really a situation. Now, one of the best reasons to pressure a CV is going to, 1, screw with the player, try to keep them busy, or 2, because there's literally nothing else to affect. There might be a situation where there's just so much AA or people are in smoke that there's no other options. And rather than sacrifice planes to the holy smoke god, you could instead run around, take an extra 30 seconds, go behind, slam a CV, and maybe start to make him run, dislodge, think different, and screw up. You can tilt him. So do I expect to see it? No. Could it be a thing? Sure. But fighter and interceptor builds, if you have any points in fighters and such, you can completely block out the attack lines on a CV. And then it's either they go over your team, which has lots of AA, or they go through a fighter, which latches instantly and kills 7 planes. I don't know about that.
So what I'm hearing from you guys is it's high risk, the reward's good, but the amount of resources and time you're tying up is probably not going to be worth it. Cable Guy, you agree with that? You have any different thoughts being likely to take the Immelman?
I mostly agree. I mean, first I'll just say, I want the CV to try to snipe me. And even if he kills me 10 minutes in, he's going to lose a shit ton of planes, and my team is going to roll the map because I'll be striking during the same time. I think it's viable, but it's not a first option. So once again, football reference, it's a check down read to your second or third check down. In the sense of early game, it might be viable to get some chip damage in. Maybe your battleship can get a good salvo when you spot them. Especially with successive drops with the Immelman, I might drop a DD or a player, and I might have 4.5 planes left, and I'll just go throw 4 bombs into him just to do it. So later on in the game, maybe there's a chance to either take him out, or early game he just backs up and increases the cycle time. So I think it's a good option to have, but it really shouldn't be your go-to. So given that video that we're referencing, I think you're going to see a lot of it in randoms for the lulz, and I think you're going to see a lot of teams at the lower tiers try to do it, but it's just not effective.
All right, guys. Very good. You got anything else, Boggzy?
Yes, I have. I feel like we've covered most things. One of the things I really want to ask about is the Midway. So if we look all the way back to season 9, which was the first season of Clan Battles with carriers post CV rework. I think I have all those disclaimers correct. The general rule of thumb was that people brought the Hakuryu or the Midway. The Midway obviously didn't have the ability to citadel cruisers the way that the Hakuryu could, but it still had enormous torpedo alpha when it managed to get a strike off that landed a number of torpedoes. It still does have very high HE bomb damage alpha, and the rocket planes as well had the option of bringing the 127mm HVARs, which were better and still are better at striking DDs, or the Goliath Tiny Tims, which actually pen 68mm of armor, including which is enough to include, for example, a Petro's hull armor. It'll pen the upper hull or deck of a Petro. So my question to you guys is, do you think there's any chance of the Midway being the dark horse here and actually being the most versatile boat that you can bring? I guess that's just my question. Triarch, maybe we'll start with you. Do you think the Midway is viable? And if you don't, how much sort of massaging and how much ooching would take for Midway to be actually superior?
Well, my thing with Midway, of course, is its torp planes, like, they are really easy to dodge. Like, against any kiting cruiser or even like other cruisers, like cruisers in general, it's just very hard to land all of them. And after that, like, unlike FDR, which has the same torps, but the planes can actually do the turn thing, which allows it to actually hit the torps, unlike Midway, and as well as the lower plane reserves in general of Midway, just makes it feel pretty much like worse. And then its bombs, the bombs are really good against ships like DDs, as well as just doing like HE damage against cruisers in general. But when it's doing damage against cruisers, a lot of it is healable, especially the dot damage, which just isn't like that much valued as much as Citadel damage in Conf, of course. You could probably see Midway make a resurgence near the end of the season, because midway through the season, you will see that...
Midway through the season?
Yeah.
This is a comedy podcast, too. You guys got to remember that.
Midway through the season, there are going to be the rocket change, of course. And you might see a bunch of DD comps start up then. And then you might actually see Midway becoming a lot better, because, in my opinion, it's the best CB against DDs with its bombs.
Okay, fair enough. Ahskance, what about you? Midway, yay or nay? And if it's nay, what does it need to be a yay?
I ran the Midway through Season 9 most of the season. I like the Midway a lot. It's a comfort pick, but you're going to see a lot of cruisers in clan battles, and she doesn't apply damage to cruisers very well. Her reticle's built for battleships, not cruisers, so you miss bombs. Her torps are built for battleships, not cruisers, so they juke. And the rockets, while the Tiny Tims can rip into a Petro, they're only doing about 7, maybe 8. And it's like, okay, that's damage, but it's not rock your world damage.
Rocket
Whereas
your world
the Hakuryu torps, no, there's not rocket your world damage. So, the Hawk torps, bombs, the 20,000 wham of a very maneuverable FDR, the constant sieging pricks from an Immelman. In general, I think those go farther. But, I mean, the Midway, if she lands her damage, she is an FDR. And she's faster and more responsive than the FDR. She's much more precise. So if you do see people swapping from cruisers to destroyers, I mean, she's not bad against cruisers. You just got to hit. Well, if they come out with DDs, then that's definitely a change that's going to work out. Because I mean, the bombers, you've seen the stuff on Reddit where like some destroyer eats 6 bombs and gets deleted off the face of the earth.
It has happened to me on stream. I was speechless. Yeah.
It's pure RNG, but it happens. And the fact that it does happen could mean the make or break moment in a clan battle. So it's like, if you're against 6 DDs and you're in a Hakuryu, I mean, you throw torps at them and they just laugh at you. It's like, yeah.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So for you, the Midway would be an option, not necessarily something you'd do, but would be more attractive if there was a heavy amount of DDs in the meta. Okay. We have Ray and Cable to do, right? Yeah, okay. Cable guy?
You could ask one of them about the Audacious. Like, that's a ship that is so, like, not even going to be brought. What would that take to be viable.
We could do that. We could do sink a ship. We could do refloat the Audacious. How about that? Instead of sink a ship, refloat the Audacious. I like that idea. Cable, we always save
man,
you for...
I just want...
Yeah?
Wait, I just gotta say this. Gaishu was running DD strats in clan battles, and I legit brought an Audacious. And the next day, he wasn't running DD strats anymore. He was like, "What? Audacious? What?"
Well, next time we
it didn't matter, but still.
next time we talk to him, we'll have to see if that was the reason. I like the idea of doing refloat the Audacious instead of sink a ship. So, Cable, we always seem to be saving you for last, so I'm not going to make you last. Midway, what do you think are the odds of it? And if it's a nay, what would you need to take a Midway home tonight?
I mean, I'm not. You can screw. I can't say that here.
It's okay. Everybody who listens to our podcast is probably 60 anyway.
Okay. Well then, yeah. I mean, respectfully, Midway with the stick. It's just.
Oh my God! Jesus Christ!
You said it was okay. You can edit it out in post.
I didn't know you were gonna go that far.
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, for competitive, like, it's a great pick for randoms. It's easy, it's comfortable, but like as people have said, it doesn't apply damage to DDs consistently after the nerfs. It doesn't apply damage well to cruisers, which is what we're going to be seeing a lot of. And the thing is, even after the rocket change, well, then this makes my Immelman stronger. So, like, you have the top 3 CVs, you have the Hack, the FDR, and the Immelman. They're on their own level. And then below that, you have the Midway. Below that, you have the MVR. And then somewhere, eating glue is the Audacious. So I think we're probably going to see some, because at the lower tiers, because that's what people have available. And then if the Hack gets banned, if the FDR gets banned, I think you might see more. I just don't see any form or any situation where it's going to be more viable than the top 3. For it to be better, it would have to apply damage better to the cruisers. I mean, that's all there is to it. Because you're going to see one battleship, which, it'll be good against. But the problem is it's probably going to have an AA escort, or it's going to be deep in the enemy's deep zone. So you can't do much with it. And it doesn't excel at anything. It's kind of an all-around okay CV. It's fun to play in randoms, but for competitive, it's been eclipsed by everything else.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And then who did I leave out? I'm so sorry. Ray, did I leave you out? Okay. Ray, same question to you. You're swiping left on the World of Warships Tinder, and then suddenly this great big beautiful American, stunner shows up. She's like, "Hey man, I've got these big old rockets and I've got these big old bombs and a whole bunch of torpedoes. What would it take to get you to swipe right on me? What would it take? What would it take for you to get you to swipe right on the Midway, Ray?"
Oof. Definitely it's going to have to be something to affect cruisers for sure. Because even in random battles, the first thing I looked at when I play Midway is battleships. That's like the only thing I prefer striking with Midway. Mainly because, even those tiny Tims, they do a lot of damage. Those torpedoes, they do a lot of damage. And even, unique upgrade Midway, some people run that, does so much damage to battleships. But on cruisers, especially in clan battles, where most of the pretty much, majority of the cruisers will be in the kiting away position. If you're coming to them with your torpedo bombers or rockets or even dive bombers, they'll just easily be trying to, to angle away from you, actively dodging. On top of that, planes are slow. They're, I think, like 180, 190 knots. And with that, it's a very big difference compared to Hakuryu's like over 215 knots, Immelman's 230, 240 knots. You're going to be losing a lot more planes for sure. They're very not very agile, and the whole gimmick of Midway's payloads is just longer arming times, especially tiny Tims and those torpedo bombers. You need quite a bit of distance, and if the cruiser just angles against you, that's pretty much a failed strike compared to something like a battleship that can't maneuver as well compared to a cruiser. So in clan battle, it's definitely not going to be the pick for me. I don't see it being a pick at all unless the top 3 gets banned out.
All right. So one last thing, we mentioned the Audacious. So in 12, 15 seconds or less, Ray, what would it take to make the Audacious viable again?
There are more penetrations on the bombs, or give it more higher fire chance or more flood chance for consistency.
Ahskance, what about you? How do you make the Audacious great again?
Pen. It needs at least 30 millimeter pen on the rockets, so that if you're striking a Venezia, Des Moines, or whatever the heck heavy cruiser they happen to bring that day, that you're not just going to see half or more of your rockets get shattered. And the bombs, again, pen. People aren't. I ran the Audacious, like I said, I ran it a few times, which, I mean, hey, it's for lulls, but people were bringing Thunderers, Ohios, Montanas. I ripped an Ohio apart for over 85,000 damage in under 3 minutes running an Audacious. I ran through my bomb inventory, but that dude hugged an island and sat there and cried to himself for the next 10 minutes. So if it had the ability to pen something with a 50 millimeter deck, even just that, the ability to bomb a cruiser would just jump up into the stratosphere. So if it got 2 millimeters of pen on the rockets, if it got 9 millimeters of pen on the bombs, it's a different story.
Okay, so Cable Guy, you'll drop your Immelman and take an Audacious if?
Oh, I don't know about dropping the Immelman. She's my CV waifu. But if you give me the old Audacious rockets like the reticle, where I can just smack DD for 10,000, I'd make it work. But even then, I'm not taking it. I mean, like everybody said, my biggest thing with CVs in general, if it's very competitive, is consistency. The Audacious is not consistent because it's all your damage is RNG and it's healable, and you don't have consistent pen damage. So at least with the Midway, even though I hate to say this, I don't like her anymore for competitive, is that you still have consistent penetration bomb damage. The Audacious, it's like shatter, 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 especially when you're running against things like Kremlins that just have 10 feet of armor in every direction. So give me the old rockets, I'll make it work. But the Audacious is an X that I don't like thinking about, and we're never gonna go there unless I get really drunk and really desperate.
Triarch, you got anything different to say, or you agree with these guys?
I basically agree with them. Its armaments are just nothing special at all. Its torps are just mediocre, I guess. They're nothing special like the Haku torps or anything. And then the bombs, no pen. Depends on how many fires you get, and even then, it's all healable.
So it all comes. What I'm hearing is inconsistency and lack of pen. You don't know what you're going to get. Too much RG, where you can at least depend on a narrower range of results of the other ones. You know what you're going to get. What do you got for us, Boggzy?
I got a farewell, guys. It's been just over an hour. We try really hard to keep these under an hour so that you don't feel like we're pretentious or full of ourselves, even though we so clearly are. So we're gonna go ahead and wrap up, and I want to thank. I want to really thank Triarch from 07, Devastating Strike, Cable Guy, and Ahskance from the Kill Steal Confirmed clan, and ReimuBakarei from. Well, Clan Reimu. Reimu, what did you, I know that your clan name is also, the first part of your name, but does it stand for something clever that I'm missing?
I took a lot of it from Wookiee, for example.
Oh, really?
That's pretty much it. But his clan is pretty much, his community is as a CC community clans. For me, a lot of people requested for some type of community thing on top of Discord. So I was like, yeah, I'll just make a clan then. Sure. And first week, I think that we're already filled up. I think we're 28, 29 members now. So that's pretty shocking.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations. I'm glad we could clear that up. So
thank you.
Everybody who's here, obviously we will have links to their clan or community Discords. I will also include links to Twitch, YouTube, those sort of things for anybody who has any of those, so that you can go check out these filthy Mothras in their lairs where they hibernate and wait to come ruin your day. So thank you to all of you for being here. It's really a treat to have you guys come and talk about something that I know so very little about, and I hope that the community can appreciate a little bit better about how to approach this season in terms of CVs. Anything else from you, Borla?
No, again, echoing what you said, appreciate these guys helping us out. I wish they had given you 1 or 2 less puns to be distracted by, but they did a nice job.
I am a cat looking at a fly stuck in the windowsill. That's how I operate. So without further ado, thank you all. Good luck with Clan Battle Season 13. Thank you very much for listening and for coming back. If you are someone who likes to come back to these podcasts, we appreciate it. And we will see you next time on Get to Know World of Warships.